Hi everyone, welcome to the new season of Planet Futbol. As you can see, we have a new set, we'll have some new segments, but we'll still be providing the best news and analysis for the sport we love so much. I'm Grant Wall, and sitting across from me is my good friend, Luis Miguel Echegaray. Luis Miguel, welcome back. Hope you had a great summer.
I did. I am so excited for this new set. I feel like it's a late night show. We need a drink, I think, right?
Sooner or later. Lots to talk about. Manchester City and Liverpool both win big in week 1 of the Premier League. Are you concerned that the Big Six is becoming a Big Two or even a Big One with Man City's massive wealth and Pep Guardiola?
You know, I like what Jonathan Wilson said for us a few weeks ago in terms of this topic. He said there's a big 1+1, a slightly less big 3, then Arsenal, followed by a 3 who might be bigger than medium with a fair wind going towards them. I think that's a really good... I
like it.
Yeah, right? Listen, I think I am concerned. I know that you're going to talk about this a little later, but it does worry me. I mean, I will say this, out of all the European leagues, at least the Premier League seems to be the most competitive when it comes to these teams pushing, back and forth, especially in that 6, 5, and even 4 slot, right? When you think about other leagues like Ligue 1 and, even La Liga, like it becomes, and the Bundesliga, of course, it becomes even worse. There are so many things that we can talk about, specifically when it comes to salary caps and everything like that. I know that you're, going to talk about it later, but it does worry me, especially when you have teams like Man City who can basically pay themselves to solve any kind of issue, even with the restrictions in purchasing players. Transfer bans, are no longer just the old obstacle that people can do. And it does worry me a little bit, especially really when it comes to relegation, which can be such a financial catastrophe for so many teams. So yes, my answer, it does worry me that I think the more that we think about this, the more it begins to see, just like Wilson said, there's a big 1 and a +1. Everybody else scramble for whatever they can get.
I know that Man City has yet to win a Champions League, and people are going to say, well, as long as that's the case, the situation isn't too bad. But I think the Champions League is a little bit more of it's a smaller sample size, a little bit more of a crapshoot than a domestic league over 38 games, where I think this is going to be something we talk about all season long. I think that Man City is going to run away with the title this year. Sorry, Liverpool fans. I hope we have a race. But I think if City wins a 3rd straight Premier League and does it going away, that I think there's going to be some real questions about, is City too big at this point?
Oh, good for the Champions League, I guess, because that's really where the attention is going to go. Moving on, the Bundesliga season starts Friday with Bayern Munich aiming to win its 8th straight league title. Grant, is there any reason to believe another team could win and maybe rival Bayern Munich for the title?
If Dortmund couldn't do it last year, I don't know if anyone's going to do it this season, because when you look at what happened last season, Bayern was terrible for much of the first half of the season under Niko Kovac. I thought he was going to get fired. They end up turning things around. Dortmund ends up not being very good down the stretch, and Bayern ends up winning the title. If anyone's going to give Bayern a run for it in the Bundesliga this year, I think it's going to be Dortmund when you look at what they've got. And yet still, I think it's going to be very difficult as long as Bayern is performing the way they usually do. Now, I would love to see RB Leipzig get in there as well. And I think they're an intriguing team that, they're intriguing to watch, not just because of Tyler Adams, the American, but because new coach in there who, I think is going to do some good things. And so I'd like to see Leipzig do something there, but I just don't see it happening in terms of winning the league.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's going to be very difficult once again to try and rival Bayern Munich. I mean, even with the fact that this is actually a sort of rejuvenation for Bayern Munich, as Arjen Robben and Ribéry leaving, Perisic did come in, but they're still trying to figure something out. But still, Bayern Munich is such a force. But again, I think Borussia Dortmund obviously has the closest chance. They spent 130 million euros this summer. Torgan Hazard and Julian Brandt, Mats Hummels returned to the team. They're actually a super attractive team to look forward to. But again, it's going to be this mountain to climb. And as you said, Bayern Munich had a disastrous start. I don't think that's going to happen again. So even if Bayern Munich has, a reasonably good start, it still has a much better chance to survive. And they still have, arguably the best number 9 in Europe, that's outside of the Premier League and Lewandowski, anything can still happen. But Dortmund is the closest rival to Bayern Munich. I still see Bayern Munich winning it once again.
Let's see what Julian Nagelsmann does at Leipzig, though,
Yeah.
because he's done some good things in that league. Moving on, the La Liga season also starts on Friday in Spain. Atletico Madrid had the most intriguing offseason changes. Do you think 19-year-old forward JOAO FELIX is for real, and is Atletico Madrid for real?
Let's start with the second part of that. I do. I'm going to talk about this later. I think Atletico Madrid had the best summer out of any European club. I think they did a tremendous job in the transfer window. I think they were very smart when when Griezmann left, not to like completely freak out. I think people could say, 19 years old, Joao Felix, that's a lot of money, over 120 million, for a player just like that. But let me tell you something. I don't think Atletico Madrid fans or people in Europe understand just how good this kid is. I think he's a Ballon d'Or winner. That can happen in the future. He is tremendous, a tremendous talent. And it wasn't just him. I mean, Marco Llorente from Real Madrid came in. Kieran Trippier is a really nice addition. I think Hector Herrera, the Mexican midfielder from Porto, also comes in. Diego Simeone has now strengthened that squad. And the biggest weakness, the biggest problem for Atletico Madrid for so long has been that because of Simeone's system, much like Pochettino or even Klopp, they get tired, specifically going towards the February time, when trying to find for a Champions League spot. Now this squad looks a little bit stronger. Listen, Joao Felix is the real deal.
He had some great goals.
I am such a fan of his. Diego Costa, he's going to be absent for the beginning of the season, not just because of an injury, but also because of a ban that he has leading up to it. But there's talks of Rodrigo from Valencia coming in. Obviously they still have, so much talent that can support not just Diego Costa, but other players as well. So I think, I think Atletico Madrid is going to win this league, and I think
do you really?
I do, and I'm going to talk about it in the parting shot later as why. But I think they're that good.
I will go so far as to say I think Atletico will finish ahead of Real Madrid this season.
Yeah,
I think
as it has done in the last two seasons.
I am expecting that this time around. I'm not ready to say they're going to beat Barcelona. There's so many new guys in this team at Atletico.
Oh my God, we disagree on something else. All right, let's talk about U.S. soccer, which named Kate McGrath as the first WNT GM and promoted Ernie Stewart from the men's GM to sporting director spot in charge of the men's and women's team. So there are big roles straight away. Grant, what do you think of these moves? And who do you think McGrath will hire as the next coach, as Jill Ellis, of course, has left that spot?
I'll answer the last one first. I think Laura Harvey is the favorite right now to become the next U.S. women's national team coach. She's currently the coach of Utah in the NWSL. And I asked Kate Markgraf a question when she got the job the other day, and it was a pretty straightforward one. All other things being equal, would you prefer to have a woman as the coach of the U.S. women's national team over a man? And she said, yes. So I think that's something to watch. Obviously, not everything is equal with everybody, so that doesn't mean they're going to hire Laura Harvey or any other woman. But I think that is the most likely scenario we're moving toward here. In terms of the overall restructure, Ernie Stewart, I think, is a good soccer guy. So I don't have a real issue with him taking this position. That said, there were a couple of things about the announcement that I wasn't totally thrilled about. I think one was that having Ernie Stewart be the top line, announcing both of these position moves on the same day, relegating Markgraf to the second line. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. I think they could have done that differently. I think it sends a bad message. I also think the other message is we're taking this man who is in charge of the men's national team, which has been known for not a lot of success in recent years, and now we're putting him in charge of the men's side and the women's side, the world champions, on the same day that we hire Kate Markgraf below him. I don't know if I'm totally comfortable with that.
Yeah, optically it doesn't make sense.
And so, I think Ernie Stewart's going to have to still prove himself a little bit. Here's a guy who, I don't know, I'm not inside the walls of U.S. soccer day to day to see how he works. And Carlos Cordero, the U.S. soccer president, was very positive about Ernie Stewart in those regards in the year that he's been there. And yet, the one most public thing that Ernie Stewart was part of was the process to hire Greg Berhalter as the U.S. men's national team coach. And he wasn't the only reason that process was kind of a disaster and took way, way too long, but he was part of the reason, and he certainly could have interviewed more candidates. And so I wasn't too impressed by that process that Ernie Stewart was part of. So I think Ernie Stewart's got some cred to earn, especially with the public.
Yeah, especially since now his role is bigger, as you said. Now it's like the table gets bigger for him to fill. I mean, it's a big deal. Let's go back to McGrath. I think obviously the initial situation that she has to figure out is replacing the women's national team coach after Jill Ellis. But there are other things as well, like under 14, under 16, under 17, under 18, under 19, under 20, under 23 at youth level from the women's side is completely vacant. So there are a lot of things going on at youth level for the women that need to be rectified, specifically because April Heinrichs, the technical director, left. So now there are a lot of moving parts. And going back to Ernie, I agree. I mean, to me, it's like okay, but now what, right? Now what are you going to do? Because as you said, he was also part, not necessarily the main key factor, but the reason why the Greg Berhalter situation was such a disaster in terms of like the timing of it, and now that the job comes to the fact that it's not just the men's, but the women's that he has to oversee, that's a big deal. And these are crucial years for U.S. soccer, specifically as it leads to obviously the World Cup being hosted in North America. There's a lot to do.
No, I think so. One thing I did like, though, was that Kate Markgraf will be in charge of the youth side as well on the women's.
Oh, great.
And that wasn't the case when Stewart was the GM on the men's side. So I think U.S. Soccer finally figured out they need to have, in that GM position, more power.
So no doubt those under 17, 14, et cetera, hopefully will be rectified. That's good.
Meanwhile, in MLS, Real Salt Lake fired Mike Petke this week after he had been suspended for verbally attacking a referee using the P word in Spanish. What's your take on this decision?
Listen, I've been reading a lot more about this on Salt Lake Tribune as well. There was a lot more as well. It wasn't just one verbal attack. He waited until the end of the game and gave a handwritten note with the same thing. That's very weird too. Like, what are you trying? You're specifically really trying to do that. I mean, listen, it sounds to me that the team did the right thing by parting ways, but there seems to be an anger management situation here with Petke. I don't want to be somebody that completely tries to character analyze somebody that I don't know, that well, but I think that after this altercation and the reports that it wasn't just one verbal abuse, but it was just a continuation, then something's got to give. Apparently also he was offered the choice of, listen, resign, as opposed to us having to fire you. He didn't want to do that, so now the situation became even harder for the club. I mean, to me, there needs to be, I think maybe Petke needs a few months off of the game itself and just reevaluate what's going to happen. Because yes, obviously a manager can lose control. What really did for me was the fact that a handwritten note was needed straight after that. That worries me a little bit.
This is also a homophobic term.
Right? 1,000. I mean, that's the obvious thing, right?
And so this was the right decision by Real Salt Lake. I don't think this should end Mike Petke's career as a coach, and I think he's done some good things in this league, and I think we probably will see him back in MLS at some point in some position. He's not the only coach in MLS who lost his job this week. Wilmer Cabrera in Houston is also out. So curious to see some of the decisions that get made down the line for MLS coaching positions. Head coaching positions, not a lot of minorities in MLS over the years.
No, especially now Frank de Boer as well making some noise as well. There's a lot of things going on in MLS. See what happens.
The Premier League is heading into week 2, and we're joined by our old friend Arlo White, who did an amazing job on the insane week 1 series of broadcasts over 3 days on NBC Sports. Arlo, thanks for coming back on the show.
Well, if you're going to compliment me like that, Grant, I can come back every week.
There's a lot to talk about, Arlo. Yeah, a crazy week last week. I was wondering if you could take us through what an endurance test your week 1 was like when you had all of your NBC studio teammates with you over there in England.
Yeah, so Rebecca, the Robbies and Kyle and producers came across, and it's always an absolute highlight of the season. It gets the season off to a really strong start, but it is full on. It's very intense. We started at Melwood on Monday. We went to the Liverpool Media Day, managed to grab a chat with Jurgen Klopp, which was fantastic because we were doing the season opener on the Friday against Norwich. Tuesday was spent learning all about VAR at the Premier League Match Centre, which came in came in useful at the weekend. Wednesday, rehearsals at Sky Sports, because there's a synergy between the companies now. Thursday, a 3-hour transfer deadline show. Drive to Liverpool for Liverpool-Norwich. After that, to London for Lewis's Aston Villa's trip to Tottenham. And then we drove up to Manchester for United against Chelsea. Other than a few rather predictable motorway issues, which didn't help, the rest of it was just fantastic fun. Full-on, intense, epic, but brilliant. And again, we'll look forward to doing the same thing next season.
Well, you guys were excellent, and it was great to have you. And it's great to have you here for our Season 3 premiere and the fantastic coverage that you gave us. Listen, let's talk about some action, beginning with the game that closed match day 1, Man United versus Chelsea. We just saw Liverpool beat Chelsea in the penalties in the Super Cup. Was the scoreline of the Man United-Chelsea attack deceiving, do you think, the 4-0? And how big of a job does Frank Lampard have?
I think the scoreline was a little deceiving. Tammy Abraham hit the post in the first half. Emerson hit the stanchion between post and bar. I thought the first half an hour Chelsea were excellent. I thought they controlled the game. They played most of the decent football, and Manchester United were sort of relying on counter-attacks and scraps, really. But then they took the lead, and I suppose the weak link of the Chelsea team on that day, and we'll have to see how he fares going forward, was Kurt Zouma. He didn't have his best day. He gave away the penalty, which was dispatched by the impetus going into half-time. But United were much better in the second half. They were the superior side in the second 45 minutes. I felt that the Chelsea became slightly overrun. They tired a little bit, and then United put them to the sword. It was good to see from a United perspective, Anthony Martial wearing that number 9, claiming the number 9 of Romelu Lukaku. He scored, Rashford got another one. And Daniel James, who looks, I don't know, young enough to be my grandson. It was remarkable standing next to him at the pitchside desk. And what a day for him, 21 years old, to score, 9 minutes into your debut. So 4-0, I think, flattered United. I think they were deserved winners. But Frank Lampard said at our pitchside desk afterwards, it was really sort of frustrating for him because he wanted to talk about positives, which is very hard to do on the end of a 4-0 hiding. But I think there were positives for Chelsea, and I think we've seen them again tonight in the Super Cup, albeit in another defeat, this time on penalties. It's a tough task that he's got. He's using a lot of young players. 4 of them were academy products. Tomori on the bench, another academy product as well. So it's going to take time to bed down. But I think the way that the philosophy that he has, the high press, the desire to play football, I think is going to be very entertaining this year. They certainly need to shore up defensively. But I don't think Chelsea are out of the conversation when it comes to top 4 by any stretch.
Arlo, I have this concern. I feel like Liverpool had a nearly perfect season last year, maybe even an outlier season, and still couldn't beat Man City in the league. And my concern is that City, with all its money and Pep Guardiola, is becoming this super team in England that could just run away with the title this season. Do you think I'm wrong in this concern?
I think it's possible, Grant. When you look at a team that's only dropped 30 points in 2 seasons, it's absolutely remarkable. They're rewriting any notion of excellence in English football. You know, you're not supposed to dominate like this. Even Manchester United, when they were winning league after league, they very rarely racked up the points that we're seeing Manchester City do. Yes, it's possible, but I actually think that even though they may improve this season, I think Liverpool will be improved. You know, we sat down with Jurgen Klopp last week, as I mentioned, and we said to him about, the lack of signings this year, the lack of first-team players, and he said, why is this obsession in English football with new equating to improvement? He said, why can't I improve what I've already got? And he's absolutely right, because, okay, Alisson's gone down injured. We'll see how he recovers from that problem he suffered against Norwich. But Trent Alexander-Arnold, he's so young, another season under his belt. Andy Robertson, another season of development. Joe Gomez hopefully will play a full season alongside Virgil van Dijk, and that's an excellent defence. Fabinho completely used to the pace of English football. Naby Keita's put on a few pounds. He was his season was cut short by injury last season, and I expect him to improve. And then you've got the front 3 who are just absolutely magnificent. So Joe Gomez said something very interesting to us at Melwood last week. It was a day after the Community Shield final, and I thought Liverpool dominated the second half of that game and were unfortunate not to win. And he said, City know we're on to them. And I thought for a young player, that was a real display of confidence. And I took it from that. I don't know for sure, but I took it from that that's the feeling in the camp at Liverpool. So whereas Manchester City are extraordinary, I expect Liverpool to keep hold of their coattails this season and make it another very, very close race.
Yeah, with Jurgen Klopp, anything is possible, I think. Let's talk about our good old friend VAR. I'll make it real simple. How do you think, Arlo, it did in the first weekend? And what's the overall sentiment over there as it made its introduction across the Premier League?
The overall sentiment is an interesting one because people have been critical of it, but then they have to be reminded that VAR pretty much got everything right under the guidelines and the parameters of VAR in this country, in the Premier League. It got everything right. We went to the Premier League Match Centre and we gave it a go actually at the individual consoles, and Rebecca Lowe was the only one that got 4 out of 4. So read into that what you will. She's a great loss to the officiating world. Clearly, but you can't have a PGMOL. We need her. So the overriding aspect for me that came out of the first weekend was the idea of offsides being a millimetre. Now I know that the clear and obvious edict doesn't come into it in offsides because it's yes or no. It's black or white. It's a binary decision. But when we're starting to measure armpits, where do they even start? I mean, and if it's a millimetre difference, then when are you taking, which frame are you taking for the boot touching the ball by the player playing the pass? So I don't think the spirit of the law, I don't think the law was introduced whenever it was in its current guise to catch people 1 millimetre offside. So it was interesting. We talked around the pitchside desk at the weekend on Sunday about the offside law now being tweaked to cater for the fact that VAR exists. And VAR is going nowhere, and I'm a huge advocate for it. And that, for me, my original idea is to have a margin of error, similar to cricket, which I'm sure a lot of your viewers won't be aware of. But there is a margin of error built into video technology. And I'd like to see a yellow band. Now, how thick that band is, I'm not entirely sure. And it still means there will be a line beyond which offside will be called on VAR. But it just means that instead of 1 millimetre, maybe it's 6 inches. And then maybe once you break that margin of error band, there's no doubt you're offside. There's no doubt you're gaining a massive advantage. And we're not kind of then relying on lines going up to armpits to rule out beautiful goals by 1 millimetre. So that's the only thing that I would say about it. Other than that, I thought it was used perfectly well, and I expect it to be used well going forward because the PGMOL and the Premier League have told us they're setting a very high bar. They're not re-refereeing decisions. There has to be clear and obvious evidence that a mistake has been made. So we're not going to see that many decisions overturned, I don't think.
Arlo, from all of your travels last week, after all your preparation for the season, what was something that happened that surprised you?
Well, apart from the Manchester United beating Chelsea by 4-0, I think it was Brighton. I've got Brighton down as dead certs for relegation. They've got relegation written all over them after what happened last season. But, Graham Potter's an unknown quantity at this level. They haven't added much in terms of talent in the off-season, but they went to Watford, and maybe Watford had a really bad off day, and they beat them 3-0, and that is a very solid start. I'd still expect them to struggle a little bit.
Arlo, let's look ahead as we have some great games to look forward to, including, of course, Man City against Tottenham. We've talked a whole lot of City this episode, so let's turn it to Spurs. Tottenham hasn't beaten City in the league since 2016. Spurs did, of course, beat them in the Champions League quarterfinals last season. Pochettino now has a little more with the likes of Tanguy Ndombele, who scored a great goal, sadly, against Villa last weekend. Harry Kane is scoring in August. What do you make of Tottenham for this weekend and the season ahead?
Massive test, Luis, this weekend. The key man, and you mentioned Tanguy Ndombele, he went from Tanguy Ndombele to Tanguy Ndombele in the space of 5 days. So hopefully we've got that right. That's from the horse's mouth from Tottenham's Twitter feed. He was terrific and a very good prospect. But they were toiling a little, Tottenham Hotspur, in what was a magnificent atmosphere at this unbelievable new stadium of theirs.
Well, Arlo White, it is always a pleasure to talk to you. Good luck with everything ahead in this Premier League season. Thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure, chaps. Speak to you soon.
So for people who watch this show and know us personally, the two of us love to have thoughtful discussions on the game, but we don't ever viscerally disagree on very much. So when it does happen, it seems like a monumental occasion and something we should definitely talk about. So we have a new segment called Grant and Luis Miguel Actually Disagree. You want to tell everyone what it is that we disagree about?
VAR. We disagree on the implementation of VAR, specifically in the Premier League. Grant, I'll let you talk first. Do you think the first weekend of VAR in the Premier League was as bad as much of the media coverage made it sound?
I don't. And I think it's kind of crazy the way that a lot of this was discussed, both in England and even in media coverage here in the US. And a lot of it goes to the Man City-West Ham game. It wasn't the only game where VAR made its presence known. There was a goal taken away in the Wolves-Leicester game. But what I don't understand here about it is that all of the calls that VAR made in the Man City game against West Ham were correct. And so we can have a discussion all day long about, oh, was Raheem Sterling a few inches offside? Certainly looked like he was. It wasn't by a lot. But if your issue is with that, your issue is not with VAR. Your issue is with the offside rule. And I do think maybe the IFAB and FIFA should get together and consider altering the offside rule. Maybe it'll allow for, the need of clear daylight between the attacker and the defender. But the problem isn't VAR. All the calls were right in that game. And so I don't understand if people are getting really upset about that. It seems to me that, especially in Britain, we've seen the biggest resistance to VAR over the last few years. That's why it's taken the Premier League so long to introduce it. But it was really handled poorly in the FA Cup when they used it a couple seasons ago. But that was not the problem of VAR as designed. It was the problem of the people operating VAR. And there's plenty of reasons at times to be upset about the people operating VAR. But if VAR works pretty well, as we all thought it did during the Russia World Cup in 2018 on the men's side, the problem isn't the system itself. And right now I just feel like a lot of English fans are complaining, like you.
Grant, my friend, England would not be England if they didn't complain. I'm Peruvian, but I grew up there, so I know exactly what I'm talking about. And let me tell you something. Some of the most important decisions in mankind has happened as a result of complaining. Listen, we're a little bit gray area on this theme of us disagreeing for this week, because I do agree VAR is not the issue. It's the issue are the rules behind the decision making. I will tell you this though. The Raheem Sterling, that was offside. To me, it's how long it's taking to make this decision. When you have, I think not even the Sterling one, but specifically the Wolves situation against Leicester City, that took almost 2 minutes when De Donker made that goal, and it was obviously called. 2 minutes. The problem I have with this is the fact that, I know, listen, I've gone back and forth on this, but the purist in me is telling me that it really is killing the sort of feeling and the euphoria that it feels of getting a goal. Something needs to be rectified. In fact, that's why I'm calling it a gray area for this week, because VAR is needed. There is no doubt about it. And I think that it's much better than I expected for the weekend. But if we don't complain, this thing won't get to perfection. And we need to make sure that these decisions need to be taken less than 2 minutes. I think Nuno Santos said it. He doesn't have a problem with VAR, as me. I don't have an issue with it. This time frame, though, between what happens and when the decision is being made needs to be way shorter.
I do think that as, we're only in week 1, week 2 here, so I think as the season goes on, you would think that they would get better and quicker on the time situation. And I think also what we've learned in general at VAR around the world is you don't want to have over-involvement of the people running VAR. That was what the problem was at times, I thought, during the Women's World Cup.
Yeah.
And in leagues where VAR hasn't worked as well. I'm talking about Mexico here too. Just over-involvement, taking way too much time, and then you see 9 minutes of added time on a half, and that's ridiculous, right? But in Germany, for example, I think VAR has worked pretty well. I think
the Germans don't complain like the Brits.
But they don't review that many. They don't.
Yeah,
they
that
aren't
is
over-involved.
true. And also the decision has already been, like VAR is not as needed as much in the German league, right? Listen, like I said, like I really think it was a solid VAR week for the Premier League. I really hate the fact that it takes 2 minutes to make that decision. That's absolutely ridiculous. Grant and I have been able to agree on who has been an extremely interesting social media follow recently. Grant, whose social media are we checking on this week?
This week's intriguing social media figure is Jermaine Jones. The former U.S. World Cup midfielder posted a photo on his Instagram with his ex-wife, Sarah, from Ibiza, where they have been spending time with their kids. For anyone like me who's been following Jermaine's Instagram for a while, it has been a roller coaster few months. Jones posted a lot about his marital turmoil in real time as he blamed the actor David Charvet for breaking up his marriage. TMZ reported that both Sarah Jones and Charvet got temporary restraining orders against Jermaine. But Jermaine and Sarah now seem to be getting along a bit better if they're together in Ibiza. What do we make of all this?
I have no idea what
I'm not laughing about restraining orders.
No. Just the turn of events and how it's led to that.
Yeah.
It's very, very strange. Every time I look at Jermaine Jones's Instagram, it gives me a headache. I don't understand, what's happening. I mean, it's very intriguing.
It is. I mean, he's posted some interesting stuff over the years, especially in his Instagram stories, which then sort of disappear, but they still go public. So I remember right before the U.S. soccer presidential election, there was all sorts of stuff going out. And then Jermaine Jones comes out on his Insta stories and talks about Don Garber fixing the blind draw that sent Jermaine Jones to New England instead of Chicago when he first joined the league. And that's a pretty crazy accusation to make. I know that it was something that actually Jones had talked to me about before that on background. So it was something he'd been wanting to do for a while. But if you want to follow someone in soccer who doesn't hold back on Instagram, Jermaine Jones is your guy.
Let's get him on the show. Jermaine.
I think he'll join us.
Jermaine, come over.
Joining us now is Jessica McDonald, a recent World Cup champion with the U.S. women's national team and a forward for the North Carolina Courage, which meets Manchester City on Thursday in the semifinals of the ICC. Jessica, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, you guys. I appreciate it.
Lots to talk about. You and your U.S. teammates obviously took the world by storm this summer. How has your life changed since you came back to the U.S. as a world champion?
I think all the opportunities that are just kind of flowing through, I think, all of our lives right now, and being able to just have this voice. We're in the middle of this movement, and people want that. They want that type of leadership because, obviously, we're fighting for something historic right now. And I think that since we have this voice, that's just what people want right now. And so that's the life-changing thing. It's just these opportunities that are just kind of flowing through our lives right now.
Yeah, Jessica, we're definitely going to be talking about that specifically later. I wanted to start though with your North Carolina Courage kicks off the ICC against Man City. And boy, does that seem like a super intriguing match or what? With the team having a few England internationals such as Jill Scott, Steph Houghton. You can see where I'm going with this. Is this a mini World Cup semi-final reunion of sorts? Or do you not see that at all? Is it just straight up focusing on your club?
I mean, it's just straight up focusing on our club. Simply because obviously we're at the ICC tournament and we know that they have some great talent on their team. And I mean, we have our international and national team players as well. So it's definitely going to be a good clash between two very amazing world-class clubs. And it's just amazing for the world to kind of see something different for women's soccer right now. And so I just think that obviously it's just going to be a battle between two amazing clubs that are top notch in the world.
That semifinal is going to be on ESPN Plus for folks watching. Your team, the Courage, is the defending NWSL champion. You're currently in a tight race at the top of the current league standings. You just had a tough 2-1 loss at Portland, but you did have a league record crowd there of more than 25,000. What do you think the NWSL needs to do to keep this post-World Cup bump going?
I think marketing-wise is huge right now because coming off the World Cup, we sort of had this amazing momentum fan base wise in NWSL, and they want to come and see us play, which is absolutely amazing. And so I think if we just keep this momentum going, market the heck out of this, and continue that riding through, the following seasons as well. I think it's huge, and it's very, very important for the NWSL to do so.
Jessica, I recently reread Henry Bushnell's great piece with you for Yahoo. You have an incredibly inspiring story, a story of struggle, hard work, some more struggle, all as you supported your son Jeremiah while fighting for a career in the game. Now you're a World Cup champion, and it's just amazing. What did it feel like when you lifted that trophy, and what message do you have for young athletes who sometimes feel things are just too hard to overcome?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it was a dream come true. That's just something that I've been waiting for 31 years now. And so it was almost a feeling of relief at the same time, even though I was overwhelmed with joy. I mean, relief just kind of flowed right through me. And so, like, just looking back on everything that I had gone through throughout my career, and then something I would obviously tell the young athletes, and obviously continuing to inspire my son in some kind of way, is that obviously not a lot of people tell you how hard life is, and no one's life has been easy. There's just no such thing. At some point, we all face adversity. At some point, we face hardships. And so if there's something in life that you want, or a goal that you're trying to reach, don't stop until you get there. It's going to be a very difficult road to get there, because there are going to be things that are going to try and hold you back. There are going to be people who are not going to be part of your circle that you think are part of your circle. And so you got to get rid of toxic people in your life, or anything negative in your life, or if anything negative happens, turn it into something positive. Because sometimes life can just suck and it's hard. And so you keep pushing through that, then it's just worth going through all the struggle and then being able to succeed and being able to fulfill your goal. It's just a good feeling, and it's just worth it.
Well said.
Jessica, some of your U.S. teammates have had issues with U.S. Soccer's approach ahead of your mediation for your gender discrimination lawsuit, including the Federation paying Washington lobbyists to try and persuade lawmakers and even presidential candidates on U.S. Soccer's claim that it paid the women's team more than the men's team over the last 10 years. What are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, I kind of laughed that off a little bit. Sometimes we can't feed into those types of things, obviously, and obviously we're going to handle this entire thing on a very professional level, and obviously this is just something that we're going to continue to fight for.
As a minority, it's also important to me, Jessica, that we see many athletes of color, especially in the women's game, as part of NWSL, and hopefully one day the U.S. women's national team and the U.S. as a whole. Selfishly, more Latinas. What do you think needs to be done in order to see more athletes of color in the game?
I think that's kind of where we step in at. I think it's a big deal for, women of color to be able to succeed on a high level, no matter what career you have. We're here to show the younger generation, because they look up to us and they're able to see, oh my gosh, she looks like me, or oh my gosh, she's this, she's that, she has dreadlocks, I have dreadlocks. That's amazing. And I want just little things like that, them being able to relate just because of our skin color and just the way that we look, because we stand out. I want that to inspire them to want to be successful in the future, because we need more of that. The United States of America is a very diverse country, and we need to show that at a higher level. And we need to continue as leaders here, as people who are obviously being looked up to. That's just something that obviously we need to encourage, that it's very possible to make it to where you want to get to. And it's possible that, you can be a Latino or you can be Black and play on the USA women's national soccer team. And it just shows, because we have quite a diverse team now on the U.S. women's national soccer team and in the NWSL. I mean, we've got Brazilians, we have we have blacks, we have, like, you name it, we've got it in this league. And so it's just going to continue to expand because we're inspiring the younger generation to obviously fill in our shoes once either we're finished or while we're still here.
Well, Jessica McDonald, congratulations on everything you've been doing this summer. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. Thanks so much, you guys.
Before we get to our parting shots, Luis Miguel and I are going to give our games of the week. These are essentially the games that we think will be the best game or the most interesting game or the game with the best storylines heading into it. Luis Miguel, do you want to give yours first?
My game of the week, guys, is Athletic Bilbao against Barcelona. Here's why. This is the beginning of La Liga. And this is the beginning of somewhat of a new era with Barcelona. Messi is doubtful for this game, so I really think, we're going to see now how Griezmann really fits in this whole system. It's going to be interesting to see how Barcelona defends that title. Luis Suarez will be fit, Dembele, of course, but it's going to be interesting to see how this Barcelona with Griezmann, which really intrigues me, will be interesting. Because to be honest with you, we can talk about the Premier League as much as we want, but I do like the fact that La Liga is beginning. Barcelona has a team now. Frankie de Jong, of course, one of the most exciting midfielders in the game. It's going to be an interesting one.
My game of the week is Manchester City Tottenham, which you can watch on Saturday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern on NBC. Here's why I think you should be tuning in. This is an opportunity for Man City to send a scary message to the rest of the Premier League when you've got Tottenham, which is the team everyone's expecting to finish third behind City and Liverpool, going up there. And after that performance that we saw from Tottenham the first week against Aston Villa, everything changed once Christian Eriksen came out onto the field and made a difference in that second half. Tottenham needs Eriksen to be on its team this year, and there's actually still concerns that he may go out on a transfer to someplace like Real Madrid before the end of the continental transfer window. And that's got to be a huge concern for anyone associated with Spurs when you saw how poorly things went in this game when Eriksen, in the first game, was not out there. But I still think even if Eriksen's out there against Man City, it's going to be extremely difficult. I expect City to start its best lineup, which they didn't do in the first game, which they won 5-0 at West Ham. I think City's going to send a big message here. And finally, we have our parting shots. And I'll start with mine. I'm going to go out on a limb here and pick this season's champions of the Big Five European domestic soccer leagues. Actually, no, I'm not. That's not even close to going out on a limb. Manchester City in England, Bayern Munich in Germany, Juventus in Italy, Barcelona in Spain, PSG in France. All these teams won repeat titles last season, while Bayern is going for 8 titles in a row and Juventus for 9. I love the unpredictability of the Champions League knockout rounds, but let's be honest, there is no unpredictability anymore when it comes to who wins the biggest European leagues, and the gap between the top team in each country and all the other teams is only getting bigger every season. Look, I know Liverpool fans think their team can win the title this year for the first time in 29 seasons, and yes, LFC did win the Champions League title last season. But the domestic leagues are a longer slog than Champions League, and while I'd love to see another great Premier League title race, I think it's going to be hard for Liverpool to repeat last season's 97 points when they only lost once in the league and still placed second behind Man City. What can be done about the situation? I would love to see leagues across Europe adopt the same NBA-style salary cap. It could still be a really high cap number in the same way that NBA players don't complain about suppressed salaries, but it would at least restore some competitive balance in leagues that don't have any at the top right now.
It's a good idea. It's a good idea. I think it at least brings some parity to, not necessarily just the top 3 or the top 4 teams, but also, those teams that are really just trying to survive. I think like we were talking before, the Premier League at least has some kind of play around somewhere in the middle. But when you talk about Liga, the Bundesliga, that it's just boring. Every single time you see the same outcome. And that's why, like as you said, the Champions League at least gives some kind of other incentive. But the unpredictability of like regular season in domestic leagues is just over.
Too many people in European soccer, when they hear the term salary cap, think of MLS and think it has to be a microscopically low salary cap number. But it doesn't need to be. Just look at the NBA.
Absolutely. La Liga begins this weekend, so I want to take this opportunity to talk about my pick on who will win the league this year. Ladies and gentlemen, señoras y señores, the 2019-2020 title in Spain will go to, drumroll please, Atletico Madrid. Yes, Atleti. After 2 consecutive seasons of ending second to Barcelona, Diego Simeone's side will claim the title for the first time since 2013-2014. Hey, I have to gamble with my picks. Here's why. To begin with, out of any team in Europe, in my opinion, Atletico Madrid had the most productive summer in the transfer window, where after selling key players such as Diego Godin and Rodrigo, it didn't panic nor make any hasty decisions, and instead implemented a plan that fit not just the system, but the overall environment around the club. The biggest loss, Antoine Griezmann, was a big one, but I believe that JOAO FELIX, even at 19, has a chance to show the world he is not just the real deal, but a Ballon d'Or winner in the making. Yes, I believe he's that good. Add strong signings such as Marcos Llorente, Héctor Herrera, Mario Hermoso, Felipe Augusto, and England international Kieran Trippier, and Simeone now has a more balanced, deeper squad that can survive and win thanks to his demanding tactics. Barcelona is still the main contender to counter my argument, and who knows if Real Madrid will wake up this season. All I know is this: Atletico Madrid is ready to take the league by storm. In fact, it's been ready for a while.
You've almost made me believe this. Almost. It's a good argument, and I just think they're a year away. I think when you have that many changes in an off season, I think they've made good moves, but I think it's going to be hard to get everyone on the same page in this first season for an entire season. And let's not disregard Barcelona, which
of course
obviously has an extremely talented team, and I think Messi is as driven now as he has ever been. So I'm not with you, but actually based on what I said in my thing earlier, I would love to see there be a great title race in Spain that lasts the whole season.
Yeah, and like I said, listen, Barcelona is still the main contender, and I just want to remind people that Atletico Madrid came second twice in the last 2 years, and last year they really had a terrible rut that actually I don't think it's going to happen this season. I mean, everything falls down to the fact that they have a better, deeper squad. All it takes right now is for Simeone to understand when can he take care of business, and if Barcelona maybe will put so much focus on the Champions League and therefore take a foot off the pedal, but we'll see.
Vamos a ver. That is it for this week's episode 82 of Planet Futbol. Thanks for joining us, and catch us next week and every week after that on Thursdays on SITV or SI.com.